CPD Show. Welcome back to That CPD Show. My name is Chris, and I'll be the host for today. And today I'm joined on the podcast by two guests. This is actually my first ever podcast with not one guest, but two guests. And today I'm joined by Maria Pavey and Verity Yeates from the UK Church Administrators Network. I think I've got that absolutely right, haven't I? Brilliant. Yes. Maria and Verity, thank you for joining me. Great to see you both. And how are you both doing today? Are you well?
Very good, thank you. Yes, enjoying some sunshine.
Excellent. And Verity, are you well today? Are you doing good?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, excited to be here on the podcast.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm excited too. Now, it is a tradition on this podcast that we talk about development, and it's things that are going to be helpful for ministers. But we also talk about your favorite dessert as well. It's become like a running theme. I've asked every guest that has appeared on this podcast what their favorite dessert is. So I'm going to ask both of you. I get kind of like a double helping of dessert today. So Maria, we're going to start with you. Maria, what is your favorite dessert?
Well, I think this is one of the hardest questions I've had to think about for a while, but I have nailed it to trifle. That is my favorite dessert.
Okay.
I love a good trifle.
Right. Okay. Trifle. And how would you have that? Do you just have it on its own? Do you bake it? Do you make it yourself? I don't know. Bake it. Do you make it yourself? And then how do you prefer it?
I definitely make it myself now, because I have to have a special diet, so the sponge has to be wheat free. So I like a sponge in it, and I like a good layer of cream on the top, and it must have blancmange in it as well. So
okay,
got to have all those layers in it.
Okay, blancmange. I mean, and actually, we haven't had a lot of people that have gone for trifle, but I do remember one guest actually talking about trifle, and I actually, to my complete lack of knowledge, I didn't really remember what goes into a trifle. I can't actually remember all the different layers, which I feel like I should know by now. I'm nearly 40, so I should know what's in a trifle, but I actually can't remember. So remind me. So you got blancmange in there.
So sponge on the bottom.
Okay.
Some nice fruit, jelly, blancmange, and cream. And the cream has to be thick. We've got a tradition in our house. When I was young, we used to go to a lady's house called Mrs. Winder. She was from the local church. And she always put about an inch of cream on the top of the trifle, and then lots of sprinkles and nuts and things on the top. So if it's not a Mrs. Winder trifle, it's not really there.
Okay, that's brilliant. Mrs. Winder's trifle does sound like a very good dessert. That's amazing. Verity, let's go to you. What is your favourite dessert?
I really struggled with this question because there's so many desserts to choose from, and I don't even know if this counts as a dessert. So if it doesn't, say. But I love a good cinnamon roll. It's probably my favourite sweet treat. I just love the cinnamon and sugar and the cream cheese frosting. So for me, that's my favourite. I don't know. You wouldn't order it at a restaurant, so is it technically a dessert? Would it count?
Well, I think what counts as a dessert is in the mind of the dessert eater. So I'm going to say that is absolutely fine. I do love a cinnamon roll. Obviously, it's quite a breakfasty thing, but very good. What would you have it with? Would you have it with a coffee? Would you have it with a tea? How would you have it?
Definitely a good strong decaf coffee for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good choice. Now, I've also heard something about a cinnamon roll, which is a new thing. I think I saw it online where you eat it from the inside out. Is that right? Is that a thing?
I think the middle bit's the best part. Definitely.
The middle bit is the best. It gets the most amount of the kind of sauce thing.
Yes, yeah. Most of the frosting and like most of the sugar inside, I think, as well.
Yes. And have you got a specific type? Would you go to like a bakery? I know that you can get those ones from the supermarket that come in that kind of tubey thing. And I've done those before. They're pretty good. Have you got a favorite place to get it from?
Are we allowed to say supermarket names? There is a particular supermarket that does a good cinema roll.
You can. We'll just say that other supermarkets are available.
So a Tesco cinnamon roll. I highly recommend that there are other cinnamon rolls and other supermarkets available too.
Well, that does sound like a good one, and to be able to have one that is readily available all around the country. My favorite cinnamon roll, the fact that I know where my favorite cinnamon roll comes from, shows that I am that much of a dessert food person. So I live in Gloucester. But there's a local bakery in Cheltenham, which is the next town over, called La Boulangerie. It's a French bakery, and if you go there, you are paying way too much for a cinnamon roll, but it is worth every penny. And my wife does often send me on a trip. It takes me about 20 minutes to drive there. Often there's a big queue, so you have to queue up outside, and then it takes you about 20 minutes to drive back. But it is worth the drive. So I do think that it is worth the drive for a good cinnamon roll. So I would definitely agree on that. So brilliant. Two excellent choices there, trifle and cinnamon roll. Absolutely brilliant. Actually, I want a cinnamon roll now. That does sound like a good idea. Okay, so we are not just here to talk about desserts today. We're here to talk about administration and church administration, more than that. And Verity, could you just talk to me a little bit about what the UK Church Administration Network is and what you do and your mission and things like that?
Sure. So we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we're really passionate about equipping church administrators and managers across the UK. We recognise that, that church administration is a ministry, and that it's something that needs to be resourced well. So we're here to equip our administrators and with resources and connections with others. So there's quite a lot of things that we offer our members. Shall I share a bit about what we...
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So one of the things that Maria and I are very much involved in are local groups, which is basically like small groups, but for church administrators, to be able to connect with each other on a local scale to share encouragement and resources. And then we also have like a national forum so that people can ask questions on a much bigger scale. It's a great place to go and ask, has anyone done this before? Before I start, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Has anyone done it? And more often than not, you'll get 5 different responses from people saying, yes, I've done it here. And we just love seeing the generosity of our members who are willing to share their experience with others. It's something that I was involved in. I was a UCAN member before I started working for UCAN as an administrator. And it really blessed me in my role. And we also offer lots of training things. So we have 3 different accredited courses for church administrators and managers. And we also have ad hoc kind of regular training opportunities with our virtual roundtables, tapas training and training days. We've also got a couple of conferences coming up in June. We've got one on 4th of June in Reading and one on the 2nd of July in Sale near Manchester. And they are a great opportunity to worship together, to learn together, and just come away equipped and encouraged. And we also offer lots and lots of resources as well. So we have a library of resources which our members can access and download templates. Because again, we don't believe in reinventing the wheel. If it's been done before, go and find it and adapt it for your setting. So yeah, I think, have I missed anything out, Maria? That's pretty much what we are in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, that sounds like an absolutely brilliant thing and a great topic to dive into today, to talk about church administration. And I wondered, when I was thinking about some of the questions to ask, the first thing I thought was, are there any sort of misconceptions around church administration? Maria, I'll come to you on this one. Is there anything that you kind of, when you think about church administration, or when we think as ministers and we think about church administration, are there any kind of common misconceptions that you see that we don't understand it correctly?
I think from 17 years in church administration, I could name a few. So we'll make a list of them and just touch on a few. And I guess we'll probably come back to some of this later on as we begin to chat. But administration is something that's done in the church office by the administrator, is a common misconception, because we all need to administer the gifts that God has given to us. In order for our gifts to be truly effective, we can't just park all that in administration somewhere else. It's a bit like the gift of evangelism. Some people are gifted in it, but we all need to do it. Church administration isn't considered as a spiritual gift, and it's not considered as an aspect of the mission and that side of the church. So that is another misconception. It's just an admin role, and we sometimes say that ourselves, it's just admin, it's just secretarial, but actually it's so much more than that. I used to say things like, I rarely clean the toilets, although I have done it. I don't preach, but I need to know an absolute mountain of stuff in between. And the questions that we get asked and the requests brought to us is quite unbelievable. Another misconception, it's red tape and it's regulation. And I think I don't cease to be amazed that some professionals who do administration and do a lot of things in their professional work life step into church and it all just goes, they don't consider it necessary. Obviously, not everybody. And I think that's because of the family feel, which is really, really important, but you kind of come in a different way. And I think that we've got someone paid to do that. We don't need to do it. Somebody's been paid to do it. And that goes across roles, whether that's youth work or pastoral or other things. But actually, the church ministry is part of the church community and we all need to be a part in that. So there's just a few.
Yeah,
Don't want
that's
to go on
great.
about that all the podcast.
Yeah, no, great. Verity, I'll come to you as well. Have you noticed anything as well? Any kind of misconceptions that we make in church about administration?
Definitely. My favourite story to tell, which I've told a few times, is that when I first told my family that I was working in church administration, a relative asked me, "What do you even do? Do you just like polish the cross and make cups of tea?" And I was like, "You have no idea. The role is so varied." And that's a common misconception that it's a sedentary job, but actually, in reality, it's one of the most busiest and the most varied roles you can have. Like, no 2 days are the same. You could be arranging, wrangling rotas one minute, helping organise a funeral the next, unblocking toilets, chasing wildlife out of the church, answering the door to someone in need. The list is endless. It's so varied, and that's why I love it.
No, that's great, and I think when we're thinking about administration, I think when we have virtually so many churches, when they have staff, after the senior pastor, the next role often that's hired is the administrator, and I think that's often the case. But I think how we can set up administrators to win within the church is probably something that maybe hasn't really been thought through. Verity, what do you think we can do as churches or as church leaders to better set up the administrative staff to sort of win in their roles?
I think one of the first things that church leaders could do, the most important thing a church can do, is to recognise that it's not just about getting stuff done. Church admin is essential to the life of the church. It's not something to invest in as an afterthought only when everything else is sorted or to place at the bottom of the budget. The reality is the more we want to do as a church, the more admin is going to be involved in the background, whether we like it or not. So we need to ensure as churches that we make provision for that. And it's about valuing and resourcing that role well right from the very start. And it shouldn't be seen as an unfortunate cost, but a worthy investment that supports every other ministry to flourish.
No, that's great. Maria, I'll come to the same for you as well. What do you think that churches can do to sort of better set up their administrative staff to win?
I think I go back to talking about it being a spiritual gift and understanding that it wraps into the whole of church life, and that if administrators or operation staff are brought in at the beginning of visioning and planning, their minds just love things like that. Give us a task or some aim to get to. We want to sit with you and make sure that happens. And then it can be as efficient and as smooth as possible. I think supporting your administrative staff in the same way as you'd support other staff, part of the staff prayer, pastoral support, spiritual input, and those regular things like one-to-one check-ins, looking at what the workload's like. Supporting them publicly is a big thing as well, I think, from just the conversations at the front of church, from conversations with people in church. When you're looking at planning things as leaders, you're leading those things from the front as well. You're already thinking about, we need to talk about what does this look like in terms of safeguarding, health and safety, whatever it might be. And just, I think Verity touched on it, allowing time and funds for extra training for those administrators. We've already talked about what UCAN can offer, and invest in pastoral training for them, because the church office is very much a first place of call. So people will drop in, and sometimes it is people who are lonely and they just want a little bit of a conversation, and time has to be cut in for that. But sometimes people are popping in because they're in desperate need. I've dealt with many things. People have dropped in because it's an emergency and I need some food, or my husband's left me, or this has happened and we need some pastoral care, or it could be somebody that's suicidal, and you need to sort of learn to turn away from the laptop and be a pastoral person at that point.
Yeah, that's great. And I wonder what does success look like for administration? What when we're thinking about maybe getting our churches so that they're aligned around mission. We talk about those kind of things a lot in church world, but for thinking about what success looks like for the administrative staff, what do you think that looks like if you were to sort of describe what we could do and what success would look like if we could transform the administration side of church to better align with the mission?
I've actually had a really big think about this, and I've jotted a few things down, which I think it might look like from the perspective of a pastor, but also what it might look like from success might look like from the perspective of your administrator. So if you're happy, I'll
go for it.
I think that from a pastor's point of view, success would primarily look like being freed up to focus on people and prayer and teaching, the things that only pastors can do, because they know that the administrative side of things is in safe, capable hands. And some examples of what that might look like is less time for the pastors having to chase information or fix miscommunications. It might look like fewer drop balls because strong systems are in place and things are followed through. Confidence that the church's operations reflect its mission and values in the way people are welcomed, followed up with, communicated with. It might look like healthy teams because the administrator is helping hold things together and support ministries and support people behind the scenes. And it might look like smoother Sundays and stronger weekday ministries because the planning, resourcing and communication is taken care of. Ultimately, it's about the whole church being better able to thrive, and for pastors to know that they're not alone, they're not carrying the load alone, but because there's a faithful administrator working in step with the mission. And I think some of the ways that you can do that and is sort of counted in how it might look like from the perspective of an administrator. So that might look like for the administrator being trusted and included, not just being given a list of tasks, but being brought into those conversations, those vision conversations early, because people recognise the value that admin brings to the mission. It would look like clear communication across the team, so administrators are not chasing those last minute details or picking up pieces from confusion. It's definitely about being given realistic hours for the workload and having the right tools, systems and support in place so that the job is doable and not overwhelming. It's knowing what the priorities are, because leadership has taken the time to align admin with the wider vision. It's being allowed to and given space to plan ahead, to improve things, to be creative instead of, and this is key, instead of just constantly firefighting. And lastly, I think it's having time and space for training and development, because the leadership understands that investing in admin strengthens the whole church, not just the admin team. In short, it's about feeling seen and supported and set up to succeed, not just keeping the wheels turning quietly in the background, but playing a recognised part in helping the church live out its mission. So that's my thoughts on what success might look like.
Yeah, that's great, Verity. I love that. Maria, have you got anything to add to that? Would you add any other factors to that?
Yeah, I think that the administrator can bring almost like a web of connection and communication between different elements of church, so that we don't start to work in silos. It can be very easy. We've got a leader that does pastoral care, a leader that does youth work, etc., etc. And actually, the administrator can bring those things together, so that actually, we might be having a messy church in December with all our Christmas plans, etc. But actually, the administrator's probably thinking, okay, so how do we put something in everybody's hands to invite them to those Christmas events that we're also putting lots of work in? How do we invite them back to something in the new year? How do we get communication details from people so that we can keep contacting them and being part of the wider community of church, and just making that almost a plan as well, so that we don't have everything happening in the first 3 months of the year when everybody's back from Christmas going, oh, okay, we need a worship evening, we need a prayer evening. But actually we've got something that means that people can access it easier because it's not all happening at the same time, so that, you know, there's a greater engagement amongst the church community. I think it's practice, if you can, to have either a senior leader or a trustee, depending on your church structure, who is kind of champion different areas as well. So someone's champion maybe safeguarding, someone else health and safety, those kinds of things. So that actually, as those leaders plan together, there is someone else thinking, oh yeah, what about this? How does that affect that side of church? So that would be my addition.
That's fantastic. And when you talked about that kind of web of, you know, and the ability for the administrators to kind of break the kind of silos that can happen. Like you said, those things happen in various places. There's pastoral ministry over here. There's, you know, children's ministry and young people's ministry, and actually the administrator can provide that kind of like you said, that web that can bring it all together. And I think that's absolutely correct. And one thing I've noticed certainly in church life more and more, especially recently, is there's just such a need. There's so much administration that needs to happen. I guess as churches grow as well, you know, more people means more administration needs to happen. And especially when I'm thinking about that, you know, there's a lot more roles in terms of safeguarding because of some of the legislation that's come in, and obviously that's very important, very needed. How can churches think about the kind of the recruitment side of administration? Because I think knowing who you're looking for and getting the right skills is going to be really important. So how could and there's the recruitment side of it. There's also the recruitment of volunteers as well, and thinking about not just from an on-staff perspective, but a volunteer perspective as well. So, Maria, I'll come to you first on this. How can churches think about recruiting volunteers, or recruiting in general as well, so that you know that vast need can kind of get addressed?
I think the key to me for this, and I am obviously very passionate about church administration and getting it right, is that it isn't that we need one person to come and to take care of these tasks, but that it is actually the responsibility of all of us as a church. So whilst we might need someone to lead on some of these areas, it is a church responsibility. It's got to become part of our culture. And any one of these responsibilities, safeguarding, data protection, whatever, becomes easier when we understand that it's embedded into our culture and it's led from the top. When we come to Jesus, we don't come saying, what's allowable, what's pardonable, how do we get there? We look to how can we be commendable and praiseworthy. When we go to work, I hope we don't say things like, what's the minimum I can do today to keep my job? But actually, we need to take that same approach with all these standards through church and look at saying, how do we, as our church, become good? How do we have safe places for people to worship? How are we good employers? How are we committed to doing things well? And I don't believe in any way that God's purposes are derailed because of these things that we're talking about. Jesus taught us to care for one another, to love one another. And he sent his disciples out in twos, and that provided them with support and accountability. And I think all the things that we're talking about, all policies and procedures, are like, I know I've talked about a web of communication. Now I'm going to talk about a trellis. And I think as we put those policies and procedures up as a trellis, they are there for us to then hang things on that we do in all different areas of church life. And if things go wrong, they are also our guardrails that we can hang on to and say, okay, we don't make snap decisions, we don't make emotional decisions. How do we make the right decisions here? What have we already said we're going to do in this situation? I heard someone not too long ago say that spiritual leadership and policies and procedures are like pedals on a cycle, and they're going round together in equal to make us move forward. And I think that's important. I know you might think I'm not quite answering your question, but I am thinking about the whole culture side of things, because when then you employ someone or volunteer into that culture, you understand that we're coming together to do this. And so it's important to think in advance, what do we want? We want policies and procedures that are suitable for our environment. A church of 50 will have a different set of policies to a church of 200 or a church of 1,000. And there isn't a one size fits all. They're not documents on a shelf. They're about how we work. And I think it's important within that to have really good whistleblowing policies or policy. And a culture of we listen to people. If people are raising concerns, if people are asking questions, listening to the heart of what's there, because I'll go back to the family feel. It's very hard in a family to raise a question and say, I'm not really sure about that. But it's even harder to listen, and it's very easy to kind of dismiss in some way. I've thought a lot about this as we've kind of thought about doing this podcast. And I think it's about, sometimes in our culture, we can make small exits. So we just, oh, that doesn't really matter. Oh, no, not today, or not this week, or we don't do that like that here. We don't listen. We don't listen to challenge. And actually, the danger lies in the small exits, because you don't set out to allow bullying or abuse or any other things, but it's the small exits. So I think that I've got loads more, but I think if we go on it, but just remembering that we are also employers in church, that trustees are employers. And that's an area that we see is neglected quite a lot, that often people will leave that as almost from a grace perspective, don't actually work through that properly and look at what do we want from this role, whether that's a volunteer role or whether that's an employed role, but actually setting good boundaries and good expectations, and again, sitting with people and inspecting what you're expecting and going through that. What else have I got on my list, Chris? With charities, or mostly now, mostly churches are charities, and that comes with a responsibility under charity law. So alongside that, though, we get so many benefits. We get gift aid, that's a massive one. We get free software. Verity and I love Canva Professional. We can make lots of things on that. Free Microsoft licenses, VAT reductions on our energy, if you haven't had a look at that. And here in the Midlands, in Staffordshire County Council, we get lots of free training through the council and through voluntary organisations. So check out with your local council as well. But in answer to your question, coming back to that, it's key to recruit, knowing that there is a culture of everyone working together. I'm not coming into this role on my own to try and drag everybody along with me. I'm coming into this role knowing that from the top, this is supported, and that all together we are doing this. There's a saying in safeguarding, every day, everyone's responsibility. And I guess that's the same thing around all of these areas. And then that helps people feel like they can step forward and they can be part of something, because it's team. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
a lot in there.
very, very much so. I think that's really brilliant to think through that it's not just a job that someone does, it's a culture that we all need to work towards and foster within the whole church. I love that. I think that's great. And Verity, I'll come to you as well on that. Is there anything you want to add to that in terms of thinking about recruitment, and even thinking about recruitment of volunteers as well, and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that imagery of trellis and guardrail, Maria. I do. It's really stuck with me. I love that. The only thing I would say is that, safeguarding admin has increased enormously over the last few years. And so the more volunteers we recruit, the more safer recruitment is involved. And I would say that one of the key things that churches can do is to think about creating a safeguarding team to manage that easier. So I would recommend looking to your church members that have worked or work in healthcare, social care, education, law enforcement. They're the experts in safeguarding, because their role, their jobs involve that. Ask them if they would like, as part of their serving, to create a safeguarding team, so that the load of safer recruiting all of your volunteers is shared across the church a bit more widely. because it is an enormous job. And if, say, for recruitment and safeguarding, admin is part of an administrator's role, then a paid administrator's role, you need to really make sure that you've carved out enough space for that, because it's an enormous job.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So much to be done.
I'm
And
gonna cheek
actually,
back.
go for it.
Sorry, I was going to check back in and say there are lots of professional organisations around, like 31A, your insurance company. Lots of organisations will come in, trust advice, and be able to help. But do a skills audit of who's in your church. I was talking to a chap recently, and he said, I've been, avoiding health and safety, but I've been doing it. I've not understand some bits of it. And I've realised we've got a chap in our church who does this for a living. Why haven't I talked to him before? Because it goes back to the variety of the role. We can't know it all. Find out what people in your church are doing and use that as your volunteering people as well. People are often happy to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that wonderful, picture in scripture of the body of Christ, and actually we've all got different skills and abilities and talents and giftings that God's given us. And we need to use all of those areas for the work that God's given us as a church. And so I think that, like, including people, not just trying to do it all yourself is really really important. Just as a sort of a final question, I wonder, we've talked about sort of setting up administrators to be able to win, but also that does speak to then thinking about how can we think about ongoing development. I think the worst thing we'd want to have is to have people that come into an administrative job or volunteering as an administrator in the life of church, and that's it. There's no development, there's no growth in terms of being able to do that job better and to be able to grow in their skills and ability. And maybe there's some things that you would probably, some things that you could recommend that as part of the UK Church Administration Network that you offer. Maybe there's some things you think, oh, this thing is absolutely brilliant. So Maria, I'll come to you first. What are some of the ways that that ministers can develop their administrative staff or volunteers better?
I'm going to let Verity pick up on what we do as UCAN, and I'll pick up on a few other things. So it goes back to the professionals out there. Stewardship have tons of stuff on finance and plenty of support. Lots of the websites have free resources on there to use. Ecclesiastical insurance, say that again, ecclesiastical insurance. I was looking on their website at a link we've got on our site, and I was astounded. I'd never seen before just how many things are on there. And I probably spent 10 minutes going, that's really interesting. I'm glad I know that's there. So there's lots of resources there. Well-being support, I think, go back to how much is dealt with in a church office. That's really important. Good software, invest in some good software. Church Suite, I could wax lyrical about Church Suite because it is my favourite toy, but I won't. But it really does take the burden out of church, not just administration, because it's so much more than that. It's a whole pastoral arm. It's about how we connect as a church. It's fantastic. Expense Plus is a great finance package for churches. Then look at your denominational support. What have AOG got? I know they've got stuff at Baptist Church. And another good organisation that I've used is called Trust Advice. They have lots of policies. Do not reinvent the wheel. That's a common theme in UCAN, isn't it? We don't reinvent the wheel. If someone else has been ahead of us, let's use it. So I'm going to pass over to Verity to talk about UCAN.
Brilliant. Yeah, Verity, go for it.
So we've got a number of courses, which I touched upon very, very briefly at the beginning, for church administrators. Church admin is such a niche role, so it's there aren't that many courses out there. So we've hopefully sort of paved the way into some training and development for church administrators. So first of all, we've got a course called The Work of a Church Administrator. It's a 12 to 15-month distance learning course. We've just launched our April cohort actually yesterday. And that's a really great course that looks at different aspects of church administration, but also how it's biblically relevant, the part that it plays in the body of the church. So that's a great course. I've actually done that course myself. We've got a course called Managing Church Well, which is overseen by the Institute of Learning and Management. It's a level 5 course, and that is a great, robust course that helps give confidence to church managers, and just really equips them. And that's another long course that's about 12 to 18 months, I think. And then we have a course called Attitude Training, which is a course that Maria and I are currently undertaking. And that's not just available for church managers, but it's also available for church leaders. So church managers can bring their pastors along with them. And that is very much more of a relational course. It's about learning how to lead well, looking at your strengths and the strengths of others in your team, celebrating those, making the most of those, and just, how to become a stronger, healthier team. So thoroughly recommend those courses. Do come and check them out on our website. And then, of course, we have our ad hoc training, or I say ad hoc, it's regular, it's not ad hoc, but it's half a day or a lunchtime or a whole day, depending on what course it is or type of training it is. So our members get regular webinars where we meet together on a topic. There'll be some teaching, there'll be some discussion. So we are passionate about development. We church administration may be niche, but it still needs to be developed. We need to continue to learn. It never stays the same. So we're here certainly to offer that to church administrators.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to shine a spotlight on such an important part in the life of every single church. There's no church that's going to be around going, oh yeah, I don't need any of that administration stuff. Every church is going to need it. And I think it's really important that church leaders really, and church ministers really think this through about how they can set up the administrative volunteers and staff to really just be the best that they can be, and to be able to move into all that God's got for them, and to work well in their gifting. And I think that like you said, some of those resources but that you offer, and also that's outside as well, will be such a valuable help. And I'm even thinking about some church administrators that I know. I think that some of those courses just sound absolutely fantastic and would be such a benefit to them.
And I just thought of a couple of other places that people can go to for some free resources. So there is the church office that is run by Gavin Smith. That has some excellent podcasts to listen to and some free resources there. And the John Truscott website. John, he's the brains behind UCAN. He is the person that started this whole thing off. And he has a library of free resources. So yeah, do go and check his website out. That's John Truscott.
Brilliant.
And also, we have our local groups, don't we, Verity? I don't think we've mentioned local groups. Get together with other administrators, probably termly. They all run a little bit differently, some first thing in the morning, some over a lunchtime. But the ability to sit with other people who understand your role like you do, pray with them, learn from them. And it's often hosted in different churches. And I used to find I would not go to anyone without coming away thinking, wow, I like that. Oh, I could take that back. Whether that's a leaflet, a particular type of thing in the kitchen, or whatever it is. So get together with other administrators. And if there isn't a group near you, talk to us. We can, get that moving.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been like a trifle of help and support layered upon each other. I think a really great podcast to dive into. So thank you so much for taking the time. I think just for everyone watching this, listening to this, really think about development for your administrators. It really is very much the kind of the lifeblood of the church. It keeps the church going and moving, and so absolutely brilliant. Maria and Verity, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, and I'm sure I'll see you again very soon. So thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of That CPD Show. For more episodes, why not subscribe and give us a review? It really helps us out. See you next time.